Red John isn't just another TV serial killer. Over 15 years, this monster murdered dozens of people, destroyed countless families, and built an entire criminal empire to cover his tracks. So today we're going to walk through every single victim, every twisted motive, and every calculated move that made him California's most notorious serial killer. Our story begins in 1988 at Ellison Farm, where two men named Martin Talbot and Alan Charney became Red John's first known victims. What makes these murders particularly chilling is that nobody even knew they were Red John's work until 25 years later. Both men were bound by the hands, possibly injured by shotgun pellets, and killed with a knife. This was Red John in his infancy, working on a visualized farm where he painted his first known smiley face on the side of a barn. According to Father Peter Di Buono, who visited the farm in 1987, there was a bad vibe about that place, and some kid had drawn that smiley face. These murders were connected to Visualize, the cult-like organization that would weave itself throughout Red John's entire story. What's fascinating here is that Red John was already displaying the calculated patience that would define him. He could wait decades for these bodies to be discovered because he knew they'd never be traced back to him. This was a chess player making his opening move, already thinking steps ahead of anyone who might try to stop him. A decade passes, and Red John resurfaces. The media started calling him the smiley face killer, and newspapers began connecting multiple murders together. In 1998, an unnamed woman becomes his third victim, but this time, he has help. Orville Tanner, who would later become a crucial link in Jane's investigation, assisted in this murder. Tanner was caught and blamed for the crime, but at his trial, he did something unexpected. He told everyone the truth, claiming the real killer was someone called Red John. Another unnamed woman was killed in 1998 or 1999. Then came Janet and Carter Peake around the year 2000, and this is where we see Red John's methodology form into something truly terrifying. Janet was doing laundry when Red John attacked her from behind, slitting her throat with practiced efficiency. He began to undress her body, following whatever dark ritual was forming in his mind, but her husband Carter interrupted him. This disruption forced Red John to improvise. He stabbed Carter in the torso, slashed his throat, and then did something that would prove to be his only real mistake. He buried Carter's body in concrete beneath a strip mall. Between 2000 and 2003, 4 more women died. We don't know their full stories, we don't know exactly where they were killed. These women became statistics, names barely visible in case files that Patrick Jane would obsessively pore over years later. One name appears in the Red Dawn episode files, Sluice Feeder. And that's all we get. A surname, a life reduced to a few letters on a document. This is the reality of serial killers that television usually glosses over. Not every victim gets a dramatic reveal or a tearful backstory. Some people just vanish into the darkness, and their families are left with nothing but questions and grief. These 4 women were practice for what came next. They were the stepping stones to Red John's most personal and devastating attack. The one that would set the entire series in motion and change Patrick Jane's life forever. In 2003, Patrick Jane was living the life as a celebrity psychic, appearing on television shows and making money off people's grief and desperation. During one appearance, he did something catastrophically stupid. He taunted Red John on live television.
He's an ugly, tormented little man. A lonely soul. Sad. Very sad.
Red John watched that broadcast, and he decided to teach Patrick Jane a lesson about consequences. While Jane was out of town, Red John broke into their home. He found Jane's wife and daughter, Angela and Charlotte, and murdered them with his signature method. However, this time, he added a personal touch. He painted her toenails with her own blood, a grotesque gift specifically for Patrick. Then he left a note on the bedroom door, the only time he ever explained his motives directly, saying he didn't like being slandered in the media. But the saddest detail is what happened to Charlotte, Jane's young daughter. According to psychic Christina Fry, who claimed to communicate with the dead, Charlotte never woke up.
Ever since your wife and daughter were killed, there's a question about that night's events that's been tormenting you, yes?
Yes.
Your wife wants me to tell you that your daughter never woke up. She didn't know what happened. She wasn't scared, not even for a second.
She became Red John's first and only known child victim. This murder transforms Patrick Jane from a charlatan into a grieving man. After suffering a breakdown and spending 6 months in a psychiatric facility, Jane joined the CBI with one singular purpose: finding and destroying the man who killed his family. Between 2003 and 2009, 8 more unnamed women disappeared into Red John's body count. These were his 13th through 21st victims, and they represent something crucial about his evolution as a killer. According to the pattern that emerges later, these were probably his last victims in what you'd call a traditional killing spree. Red John was transitioning from a predator who hunted strangers to something far more dangerous, a criminal mastermind with an organization, a network, and a very specific set of enemies. Red John had perfected his methods, built his infrastructure, and was ready to begin a new phase of his career, one one that would bring him into direct conflict with the man who'd been hunting him for 6 years. In 2007, Red John met two sisters named Miranda and Lorelei Martins. He introduced himself using the alias Roy Tagliaferro, and he saw potential in Lorelei. He wanted her to become one of his accomplices, but she was too stable. She had her sister Miranda as a constant support system. Red John needed tragedy to break her down so he could rebuild her in his image. This was his pattern with accomplices: find people in despair and position himself as their savior. So he orchestrated Miranda's destruction with the help of his followers Jason Lennon and Julia Howard. Miranda was abducted, SA'd, and left to die of heat stroke in an abandoned warehouse.
Red John raped and killed your sister.
No.
He made you a victim so that he could rescue you.
No.
He preyed on your pain.
No, it's not true.
You don't want it to be true, but it's true, and you can feel that it's true.
Just stop!
Before she died, she carved the word Roy into the floor with her fingernails. With Miranda gone, Lorelei fell into depression exactly as Red John had planned. He swooped in, played the role of comforter and protector, and successfully recruited her into his organization. Miranda's murder wasn't about Miranda at all. It was about acquiring Lorelei, and Red John was willing to destroy an innocent woman to get what he wanted. Jared Renfrew was a former cellmate of Orville Tanner who claimed to know Red John's true identity. He made a deal with Patrick Jane, freedom from prison in exchange for that information. Jared and an adult worker named Juana Porfiria Braga were found semi-naked in a bathtub in Tijuana, Mexico, with multiple stab wounds. Before dying, Jared managed to write on the bathroom wall in his own blood, "He is Ma," an unfinished message that could have meant Marshall, many, marked. Then came Emma Plaskett, and this murder was pure theater. Red John changed his entire playbook for this one. Emma's body was found in a public garden instead of indoors. Her toenails were painted with blood like Angela's. But instead of painting the smiley face on a wall, Red John hired a skywriting plane to draw it in the sky above the crime scene. This was a trap designed specifically to lure Patrick Jane. Emma's twin sister Maya was abducted by Red John's accomplice Dumar Tanner. The whole elaborate setup was about getting Jane alone and vulnerable. Red John was escalating, getting bolder, and Jane was walking straight into his web. Following the murder I mentioned earlier, Carter Peak's body had been discovered buried in concrete, and Red John knew his DNA was on that corpse. He couldn't allow any investigation to connect those dots. Dr. Talon Morning was Carter's family doctor, the man who could potentially access medical records that might help identify Red John through that DNA evidence. Morning was shot in the head, stripped, frozen, and left in a public place decorated with roses.
Well, it makes him look kind of sad, don't you think? Vulnerable.
Marlon Hicks, an investigator looking into Morning's office, got his throat cut and was left with Red John's trademark smiley face painted in blood. But these murders were just the opening moves. The real devastation came at CBI headquarters itself. Sam Bosco, the agent who'd been working the Red John case before Jane arrived, was murdered along with his entire team, Nick Martinez and Mark Dyson. They were shot to death by Rebecca Anderson, a secretary who'd been working inside the CBI as Red John's accomplice the entire time. After she was arrested, another accomplice brushed by, her being disguised as a police officer. He poisoned Rebecca with an unknown substance applied to her skin. She smiled when she saw him and died on the spot. I will count these murders to the Red John's tab because these were all his followers, accomplices, and all these murders lead back to him even though he didn't pull the knife himself. Red John's obsession with his public image led to more deaths in 2010. Jacqueline Sandoval was a journalist who interviewed psychic Christina Fry on television. During that interview, she called Red John a beast. That single word sealed her fate. She was found dead in her bedroom at Lake Tahoe, Nevada, the morning after the broadcast. But the most revealing murders that year involved his copycats. Dylan and Ruth were teenage serial killers who'd been filming snuff films, attributing them to Red John and copying his methods. They'd also kidnapped a young boy named Wesley Blancfein, forcing him to participate by holding his mother hostage. When they captured Patrick Jane and were about to kill him, Red John himself appeared. He was furious about being impersonated, calling their work cheap imitations. He shot Dylan dead and shot Ruth in the abdomen, but he didn't kill Wesley. He only shot him in the leg, seemingly because the boy was participating against his will. This was the first time Patrick Jane came face to face with Red John in the flesh. Red John wore a black cloak, cowboy boots, and a creepy mask. He then recited the infamous quote from William Blake's poem, The Tiger.
Tiger, tiger, burning bright.
Ron Deutsch, an accomplice who'd been the security guard at the mall where Jane shot Timothy Carter, was found electrocuted in his bathtub with a hairdryer. Red John was tying up loose ends from the Timothy Carter incident, the fake Red John that Jane had killed. Then came James Panzer, the serial killer known as the San Joaquin Killer. Patrick Jane orchestrated one of his most manipulative plays here. He tricked Panzer into going on television and belittling Red John, saying he was nothing compared to the San Joaquin Killer. Jane knew exactly what would happen. Red John watched that broadcast and moved immediately. Within hours, Panzer was found dead in an alley. Red John also killed Barris Akar, the morgue attendant in charge of Timothy Carter's body, and left his corpse wrapped in plastic in Rosalind's closet as proof. By 2013, Patrick Jane had finally told Lorelei Martins the truth. Red John had murdered her sister Miranda. Lorelei, who'd been one of Red John's most devoted accomplices, finally turned against him. She tried to kill him, tried to avenge her sister's death, but she failed. He gave Lorelei a choice: record a video message for Patrick Jane, and he'd kill her quickly without much suffering. The alternative was prolonged torture. Lorelei agreed and recorded herself reading Red John's message. In it, Red John revealed that he already knew the names on Jane's list of suspects before Jane had even finished compiling it. If you'd like me to make a video about the Red John suspects, leave a comment and a like below. Lorelei's body was found in a dumpster in Sacramento. This murder was personal for Jane. Lorelei had been his connection to Red John, his source of information, and perhaps something more. Red John struck again, killing Eileen Turner at the Torchlight Motel in East Sacramento. She was murdered with his classic style in retaliation for something specific: Patrick Jane's knowledge that she and Red John had met before. Eileen had connections to Jane's past in the carnival, one of those happy memories Red John had promised to destroy. Then came Brett Partridge. Partridge was a forensic investigator for the CBI, a member of the Blake Association, and one of Jane's 7 final suspects for being Red John himself. Partridge had been helping Red John by switching DNA results with a John Doe, part of an elaborate plan to stage Red John's death and frame another member of the association. But Red John used Partridge as bait to capture Teresa Lisbon. When Lisbon followed an anonymous tip to an abandoned house, she found Partridge in a closet. He died in her arms seconds later, his last words being
Tiger, tiger.
the password of the Blake Association. Red John then attacked Lisbon, tasing her and painting his smiley face on her face with Partridge's blood. Sophie Miller was Patrick Jane's therapist after the deaths of his wife and daughter. Red John visited her under the guise of being a patient, using the alias J. Roth. According to her notes, he complained of severe acrophobia. She described him as middle-aged, in good health, well-spoken, with good posture, and self-possessed. But she also noted something darker, hints of a damaged and narcissistic personality. Sophie could identify Red John. She'd seen his face, talked to him, analyzed him. So Red John cut off her head and put it in her kitchen oven. Then came Charlie, and this murder was different because it revealed Red John's twisted sense of protection over Jane. Jane was taken hostage by a killer named Charlie. Charlie attempted to flee across the roof of a cathedral with Jane as his prisoner. Sheriff Thomas McAllister, who was secretly Red John himself, climbed up a ladder and shot Charlie in the chest, saving Jane's life. This was the second time Red John had saved Jane. He killed copycats who were about to murder Jane, and now he'd killed an actual threat to Jane's life. Red John didn't want Jane dead. He wanted Jane alive, hunting him, obsessing over him. Their game wasn't finished, and Red John wouldn't let anyone else end it. Kira Tinsley was a private detective. Red John had hired her to spy on the CBI team. She was his eyes inside their investigation. But when the CBI discovered what she was doing, her usefulness ended immediately. Red John stabbed her to death. As she was dying, Kira managed to give Jane crucial information. She told him that her attacker had a tattoo with 3 dots on his left shoulder. The tattoo turned out to be the mark of the Blake Association, Red John's secret criminal organization of corrupt law enforcement officials. Red John's endgame was approaching, and he needed to fake his own death to escape. Brett Stiles and Ray Hafner became the final pieces in that plan. Both men were on Jane's list of 7 Red John suspects. Jane gathered the 5 remaining suspects at his house in Malibu. He wanted to see which of them had the 3-dot tattoo on their left shoulder. When they revealed their shoulders, 3 men had the tattoo: Gail Bertram, Reed Smith, and Thomas McAllister. Before Jane could react, a bomb exploded. Red John had armed it in advance, knowing exactly how the confrontation would play out. Stiles and Hafner died in the blast. Their bodies were used to help stage Red John's death and frame Gail Bertram as the real Red John. Since I decided to count his accomplices too, here are all the cases where someone was killed by Red John's accomplices on his orders or in some other way caused by him. An unnamed police officer was shot by Dumar Tanner while trying to escape custody. Todd Johnson, a serial killer and Red John's friend, tried to reveal information to Patrick Jane, but was set on fire and killed by Craig O'Loughlin. O'Loughlin also killed Manuel Montero, Todd Johnson's accomplice, stabbing him in the back to frame Madeline Hightower. Anthony Gupta, working for Red John, tortured Hightower's cousin Max James to death, killed Michael Takashime, and blew up Alan Dinkler. O'Loughlin shot police officers Cole and Mayers to death. Later, Luther Wainwright, the CBI chief, was abducted and killed in a gunfire exchange with the FBI. Robert Kirkland was shot by Reed Smith and covered up to look like an escape attempt gone wrong. A bartender in Sacramento was bashed over the head and stabbed to death by Gail Bertram after recognizing him from the news. Police officer Jones was shot by Oscar Cordero. Even Gail Bertram himself was killed by Cordero in Alexandria Cemetery after revealing he wasn't Red John. And then there were the 5 unnamed women, residents at a women's shelter, who were picked up by Julia Howard and delivered to Jason Lennon's house, where he bound, strangled, and disposed of them. While the exact count of Red John's victims is unknown, the number is estimated in at least 44 victims and possibly many more. Counting his accomplices, the body count is more than 60 victims. Red John's reign of terror finally ended in a park in Sacramento when Patrick Jane strangled Thomas McAllister to death.